Now, France is pitching what it says is a new model of partnership with African countries at a huge summit that's been getting underway in Kenya. If you're with us in the last hour of the programme, we brought you Emmanuel Macron's speech live from the summit. Comes as France completes a military withdrawal from West African countries that has been widely seen as marking declining influence on the continent. We heard from Macron. He talked about France not offering assistance, that those days are behind us. And instead, he talked about co-investment and also said, your success is our success. Well, let's hear exactly what he had to say.
The relationship I've tried to build over the past 10 years is one that takes a clear-eyed look at the past. We've done this work with Algeria, Cameroon, and Rwanda that looks at the present with courage, as we did with the restitution of artworks, that seeks to reinvent the monetary and economic relationship that invests in sports, the cultural and creative industries, and in joint investment with the continent, and that, with respect, wants to stand alongside Africa in pursuing its own agenda.
Emmanuel Macron there talking in the last hour. Well, Doug Herbert, international affairs commentator, is with me once again here on set. Doug, I love the way you've written this first question. You talked about it's part of Macron's ambition to put France's colonial past in Africa in the rear-view mirror. That's really what it was all about, isn't it?
It's a paradigm shift. Look, what do you do if you're a middling European power, former colonial master over much of a continent, and all your old colonial underlings now either hate you or are hostile to you and want very little or nothing to do with you? That's essentially the position Macron finds himself in with respect to Francophone Africa, where French troops have been essentially kicked out of Mali and Niger and Burkina Faso, influence dwindling in other Francophone areas, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, Chad, so on and so forth. So what he's trying to do is, I've called this a rebranding exercise of French foreign policy. You know, Macron, he's been honest about it in the sense that he has made this new foreign policy shift towards all of Africa as a continent, very, very prominent since the outset of his presidency. 2017, he says, I want no more to do with this Françafrique. It was one word, France and Africa melded together in this one foreign policy, which basically meant that France called the shots politically, economically, militarily over a lot of what it considered its sort of backyard, its fief, if you will, across many Francophone countries in Africa. Those days are over. So the Anglophone part of Africa, right, the Anglophone countries in East Africa seem to be a very inviting place to gain a new foothold, right? Because you don't have that colonial past. They're not hostile to you. And maybe you could start with a clean slate. And that has been Emmanuel Macron's broad ambition since 2017. But let's also be fair. Macron has had a lifelong interest and attraction to the African continent. He comes by this attraction honestly. When he was, I think it was 2002, he was an intern. He did in Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria. He went on later. He's done, I think, more trips to the African continent than anywhere else. And he's the first French president who was born in the post-colonial era. That is, after most of the former colonies in 1960 wrested away and gained their independence from France. So he's a new generation in that respect. And he sees opportunities in a place in Africa where there isn't that stigma of France's colonial past.
How's it sitting, though? I mean, William Ruto, who's also co-hosting this conference, of course, the Kenyan president, he's got his own mission, his own things that he wants to get, hasn't he?
Absolutely. Look, Macron, it's Emmanuel Macron, right? And it's his job, you could argue, because he's president of France, right? He wants to put France at the center of this sort of, really forefront on the world stage, out there pushing for new alliances in a new and changing world based on equal partnerships, so on and so forth. Ruto genuinely has a decent relationship with Macron. They've met on several occasions. They seem to get along very well. There is opportunity with French businesses and enterprises on the French continent. I think there's now 140 medium, big-sized French enterprises, up from about 30 a decade ago. They offer a lot of, all sorts of opportunities across digital and technology, aviation, so on and so forth. But when Ruto looks at Macron coming to Kenya, it's part more of a broader strategy on the part of the Kenyan leader to also put himself forefront in the center of the global stage, putting Africa at the center of alliance. So he sees many players. Everyone wants a part of Africa's innovation, creativity, entrepreneurial drive right now. So you have everyone from China, big player in Africa, mostly mining interests, mining development, extraction, state-funded types of things, state-backed enterprises. India's there, Saudi Arabia's there, the UAE is there, Qatar is there, the U.S. is trying to. Macron, how do you distinguish yourself if you're Macron? William Ruto basically just wants to put himself out there. I'm the go-to guy in Africa right now. You want a place where you can, winch your anchor and do business, prosperity, growth, here I am. So Macron's a part of that. Not even a bit player. He's a notable player in that strategy. But whereas I think Macron sees France as perhaps being sort of, playing that leading role, the cutting edge role, being sort of the ethical partner with Africa, whereas the others are predators. China's a predator. The U.S. is potentially a predator. They just want to get them the resources and get out. Not France. France is there with an ethically higher purpose. We want to work with you on an equal partnership footing. So it's interesting for William Ruto. Also needs investment for Africa. There's a lot of indebted African nations. He's trying to change the financial architecture as well to try to change the terms of those investments and debts.
Just time to ask you as well.
Yeah.
You listed those other countries there, Doug. I mean, doesn't that mean France is getting on board the boat a little bit late?
It's late. It's perhaps not too late. But if you're asking me whether or not France could, go punch for punch, blow for blow on business and investment, it's not doing a bad job. But like I said, you have to put it in perspective. If we weren't France 24, we probably wouldn't have such a heavy focus on France right now. We'd be talking about what other countries right now are doing in Africa and maybe mentioning France as a little bit of an afterthought. A few statistics that are worth noting. I don't want our viewers' eyes to glaze over, but France is the 5th largest foreign direct investor right now. And this is just in Kenya, supporting about almost 50,000 jobs there. I think it's 46,000 jobs. I'm just talking about Kenya, where this Africa Forward Summit is being hosted. And that is sort of maybe a paradigm or a model going forward, as Macron sees it, for what France could do in the rest of the continent. So it has catch-up to do. You're absolutely right. But it's trying to cultivate ties also with Nigeria, like I said, where Macron had done his internship over 20 years ago, South Africa, Tanzania, Rwanda, a lot of countries there that he has his eyes on as a potential opportunity. With respect to Kenya, once again, coming back to the host country of this summit, in Nairobi, $300 million in trade, and it's growing. That's about 255 million euros. So it's nothing to sneeze at. There are real opportunities there, and Macron's trying to carve out a special niche in terms of AI and health and sustainable agriculture and digital technology, so on and so forth, with respect to Africa. And he wants to do so, like I said, on that equal footing. I will just say, though, overcoming a lot of the African sort of look on the global perspective, the global stage. Africa's going to look at the world as a whole. Macron is looking for his own interests, what France can do with Africa one-on-one, but he still faces that legacy of hostility. Maybe one day France will be able to find a foothold back into its former Francophone colonies, but perhaps a lot of time has to pass, because I'll just notice in Mali, where the French troops were kicked out recently, where a junta, a military regime is in place, the average age in Mali, Stuart, is 15 years old. Most of those Malians have absolutely zero affinity to or connection with France. And that is the type of obstacle that Macron is going to face if he wants to get back into those areas in his former colonies in Francophone Africa.